Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. The last couple videos have been on beauty and books, so today we're going to talk about boobs. Alright, so if you don't know or can't tell, I am a recent breast cancer survivor, and I'm just going to share my story with you throughout the course of several videos from diagnosis, fertility, chemo, double mastectomy, reconstruction. So I'm a big believer that part of what you go through is your story to share with others and part of your testimony. So this is a big part of my testimony now, whether I like it or not. And so I do have notes, a lot of notes, that I'm going to refer to, and we'll see what I get through today with just how I came about getting diagnosed with breast cancer, how it was found, and where we'll go from here. So I will try to keep my emotions in check as much as possible, but this is the first time I've sat down to record about it, so bear with me. So let's just get into it. This whole thing actually starts way back when I was a teenager. So I'm 29 now, and when I was 15, I found my first benign tumor in my right breast, and had it taken out in the doctor's office while I was awake, which was scary. I cried the whole way through it. And unfortunately, it was benign, so not malignant, not cancerous. Unfortunately, they did not get it all at that point, so it kind of regrew or came back or what have you. When I was 17, I had the same procedure done again. And once again, it came back benign, so we were happy about that. And then when I was 19, so entering college, it came back again. And we decided to do something a little more invasive to make sure we got down to the root of it, because they weren't just able to do that while I was awake. So I went to a plastic surgeon, and they removed, they called it a tangerine-sized benign tumor, so once again, non-malignant, and had to replace it with an implant. So I actually had an implant on the right side for about 9 years until all this happened. So through the years, I've made sure that I just kind of do self-exams every now and then, just to kind of make sure that there's not anything forming that's new. And for whatever reason, I hadn't done it in a really long time. I can't tell you the last time I did it. It may be a year or two before I decided to do a self-exam in September, so it would be September of 2016. And I did a self-exam, and I found a lump just sitting on the top of my skin right about here in my left breast. So it was a completely different side. Everything else had been the right side. And so I was like, maybe I should just not worry about it. It's probably the same thing. But then some little voice in the back of my head said, well, what if it's the one time you don't call? So I called, and I just called my gynecologist, who is absolutely amazing, and I believe she is a huge part in saving my life. Called her and made an appointment. So like I said, that was at the end of September. I couldn't get in until the beginning of August and to have her look at it. And so beginning of August rolls around, and I'm not worried about it at that point. I knew it was going to probably be okay. And I even told my parents, just so you know, I found another lump. It's not going to be a big deal. We'll have it checked out just to be sure. So I go in to the gynecologist here about 10 miles away, and she's like, it's probably the same thing. I totally agree with you, but let's just refer you to Wichita, which is like an hour away or so, and have them do a sonogram just to double check. And I'm so thankful that she did that, even though we both were just certain it wasn't going to be that. I've seen a lot of the other young women's stories that's what happened. They went in, they just decided to watch it and wait and kind of see what happened. That it was probably a cyst or probably something benign, because it is so common. But instead, she referred me right away to have it just looked at to be certain, and I'm incredibly thankful for that. So the first message for you is to know your body and to do self-exams often. If there's something that just doesn't feel right, have it looked at. Don't hesitate. You're not being crazy. Being crazy could save your life. So just give a call to your doctor and have them look at it, and be persistent about it if they aren't sure. Make sure that you'll be okay in the long run. So that was the beginning of October, and I go in and have the sonogram not until the middle of October, which was Friday, October 14th, and I go in to Cypress Medical Center, and they do a sonogram, just a regular technician, and I watched the screen, and I could kind of tell something possibly didn't look quite right. I knew with the cyst, like, it kind of shows up like as a very finite object, like very smooth. And in this sonogram, there was some ridges. And so I had to sit there and wait, because amazingly, this facility, they do like on the spot readings, so you can get some feedback right away. And so I sat there in that room by myself for, I don't know, I want to say it's either at least 15 to 20 minutes, at least, as they were reading that. And for whatever reason, I just started humming to myself the song Sanctuary that we sang in FCA back in high school. If you haven't heard it, look it up. It's a good one. Just an old hymn. But I just started humming that to myself, and I don't know the last time I had thought of that song. It had been years. And the end of it says, Lord, prepare me to be a sanctuary for you. And I just kept doing that over and over and over again. And it's probably when I knew something was wrong. I could probably I think I felt it. It just took too long. So the technician girl came back in the room and said, doctor just wants to do a mammogram and see what the tissue on your other breast looks like. So red flag there to make sure that they look the same or if they look different, type of thing. So I went in for my very first mammogram. At that point, I was 28, and all the squeezing and pushing they talk about, it really wasn't that bad for me. I can't complain. I really do have high pain tolerance, so I'm blessed in that regard, I suppose. The interesting part, I guess, would be that since I already had an implant on my right side, I actually took 3 pictures instead of the normal 2, because they have to push your implants back into your chest cavity to get a full picture of those tissues. So that was uncomfortable, but the other part of it really wasn't. So I had the mammogram, and I go back to the room, and I once again wait for them to read that mammogram, and then the door opens, and the technician walks in with this really small, petite, painfully nice doctor who had to let me know that I really think that this is cancer. She kind of explained it to me in her nice voice. At that point, obviously, you're freaking out. So you don't retain all the information. But she said, I do remember saying that I would honestly be surprised that this came back benign, because it looks for sure like cancer. And so from there, she said, you have a couple of options. You can choose to do a needle biopsy right now, or you can wait till later. So at that point, I'm completely by myself, because like I said, we didn't think it was going to be a big deal. I'm sitting there by myself, having to choose whether I want to do this biopsy now, or come back later and do it some other time. So I had to make a split decision, and of course, obviously, I chose to just do it right then and there and get it over with. Because if it was cancer, I knew I needed to get it treated right away. So the biopsy part was the painful part. Obviously, it's needles. So they inject you first in 2 different layers of your skin with lidocaine, which I hate lidocaine so badly. It burns, but it's necessary so you don't feel when they get deeper. And then after that, they put a needle in and they shoot darts into your skin, so when they do surgery, they can see where the tumor was to begin with later on. And then they take the tissue samples for testing, and she told me it'd be a couple days before I heard, and so like I said, that was a Friday, and I went home for a whole weekend not knowing whether or not this would come back positive or negative. And so Monday rolled around, which I knew would be the day that I probably heard. It was a day that we didn't have school, which was good. However, I had already invited a bunch of my fifth graders to come help decorate for the book fair. So I have all these fifth graders down in the library with me, and I did have to tell my principal, because he was there, what was going on and what call I was waiting for, so somebody could kind of step in while I was taking that call. And I'm not for certain what time of day it was. I think it was towards the end of the day, probably around 3 or 4. My gynecologist called me herself, not the nurse, not her secretary. She calls me, so that should be the indication of what's going on. So I stepped into my office, I believe, and I took the call, and she said it came back as cancer. So from there, it was just, we need to make a new appointment to talk about your results, to tell you what I know, and where I will be referring you to as a breast specialist. And so hung up the phone, and so the first person that ever knew that I had cancer was my boss, Paul. And so he watched the kids a little longer so I could call my family and let them know that I have breast cancer. At that point, we knew nothing about what kind. I just knew that's what was going on. And so I made the phone calls, and once again, I had to wait. So that was October 17th. I went in to talk to the results with my gynecologist, I believe, later that week, and I have those here with me. I'm going to show, but it's not a whole lot of information. It's very vague. My information's up there. Vague pictures, like that's a tissue sampling. But basically, from the very beginning, we could tell that it was invasive ductal carcinoma. And so with all this, I'm going to break it down into like really finite details in case you don't know anything about it. And if you're my age, you have no business knowing anything about this, and I hope it stays that way for you. But just to kind of break it down, the invasive ductal carcinoma, that means, well, ductal is obviously your milk ducts, and once it becomes invasive, it has left the milk duct and has gone into the surrounding tissue. And so that was the invasive ductal carcinoma. Also in this, I could see that it was 1.9 centimeters, which, another interesting thing, I have no clue what stage I am or what I was, because I did chemotherapy first. The size-wise, it is between stage 1 and 2. Like 1.9 is on the very cusp, so I'm assuming that's where they would put me, but I'm not for certain because of my markers and all that kind of stuff, if that changes anything. It also says on here that it's a grade 3, so you have grade 1, grade 2, and grade 3 in terms of how serious it is or how fast moving it is. It also is the kind of shape it is, and so right away we knew that it was serious. It's an ugly disease when it's grade 3. So that is why we had to act in a very fast and aggressive manner because it was an aggressive tumor. That's all I knew at that point, was that it was invasive ductal carcinoma. It was grade 3 and it was 1.9 centimeters. So I had to wait like another 2 weeks to get, actually 2.5. Like it was 2.5 weeks to get into the breast specialist that she referred to me to. And she told me that no matter what, this is the person that you want. It is worth the wait if you have to wait 3 weeks. And she was totally right. I was blown away by this breast specialist. Her name is Therese Cusick. If you live anywhere in my area and you ever need a breast specialist, look her up. She is absolutely phenomenal. So yeah, I believe it was like November 1st that I went in and met with her and her team. And we sat down in her office on the couch and started going through things. And honestly, that day was a blur. Because you're getting so much information fed to you. And like I said, as a 29-year-old, I knew nothing about all of this. And my parents didn't know anything about it, but they were both there with me taking notes. And it felt kind of like a war room, like we were going in there to figure out how we were going to defeat the beast. And that's what we did. So the first thing she got out was this paper here. And it kind of lays out all the options. We first started with the 2 markers that they did know at that time. There are 3 markers for breast cancer, and they knew 2. The first 2 that they knew about was the estrogen and progesterone. So the first 2 markers are hormone markers, and if you are positive, that means that those receptors can take a certain kind of medication or therapy that will shut those down and treat those specific markers. If you are negative, you can't receive those therapies. So it's thought to be better to be positive because you can receive extra therapy and chemotherapy to target things specifically. But obviously with cancer, anything is bad. So mine came back estrogen 2%, so that's considered negative, and progesterone less than 1%. So once again, that's negative. So I kind of put it on this board so you can see. Ooh, there you go. Estrogen, progesterone is negative, and that's all they knew at that day. They were doing more testing. She called it the FISH test to see about the HER2 marker as well, and which I'll talk more about that here in a minute. But so at that point, I'm already negative in 2 spots. So that means I cannot get targeted therapy for any hormonal stuff. So we know that we have to act aggressively at that point because of that. And so she marked off right away that radiation was not an option. She did not want me to do radiation because under the age of 30, they don't like to do it because they only want to have to do it, if that's even a thing, one time in your life. And so doing it under the age of 30, she really does not like doing. So avoiding radiation at all costs immediately leads to mastectomy of some kind. Because with the lumpectomy, you are required to do radiation. Well, not required. You have a choice. But obviously, you want to do what it takes to get rid of it. So if you have lumpectomy, normally you do radiation, especially with the markers that I have. But if you do a mastectomy, you can avoid the radiation if your lymph nodes come back clear. If you have residual cancer in your lymph nodes, you have to do radiation anyways. So at that point, it's a shot in the dark. We have no idea if it's in my lymph nodes. I had testing done that showed that it was not in any other organs. It wasn't in my bones. So, which is awesome because that would automatically put you at a stage 4. All right, so the next step of this was to put in my portacath, which is right here. This is my scar, but my portacath is actually up here. You can kind of see it because it was actually accessed a few days ago. But it feels like a button underneath the skin where they insert the needle, but it has a tube that goes up into your neck area right here. You might be able to see it, yeah. There's the tubing right there. And another little scar right there. And then it goes down into your heart because they pump all the chemo through your heart because it pumps out to the rest of your body faster. And so that's what it does. The day that I had that put in, before I went into surgery, we found out about my HER2 marker. So like I said, there are 3 markers: estrogen, progesterone, and HER2. Now, the HER2 piece is a little tricky to explain. HER2 is basically whether or not it is completely rapid and out of control. So normally, you would not want to be HER2 positive because that means that it's rapid and out of control. However, I was already estrogen and progesterone negative. So we were actually praying that I would be HER2 positive so I could receive a targeted therapy. Because if you're triple negative, you can easily research that. That is the most aggressive kind because you can't receive targeted therapy and it's most likely for reoccurrence. So we were actually praying that I would be HER2 positive, and only 20% of breast cancer tumors are HER2 positive, and mine did show up as HER2 positive. So these are my markers: estrogen negative, progesterone negative, and HER2 positive. Which is the complete opposite of what 70% of breast cancer is. 70% of breast cancer is estrogen positive, progesterone positive, and HER2 negative. I'm the complete opposite. So that was a little scary because I have not met anybody that has my exact markers because it is pretty rare. I also do not know, I want to say it's called a ocotype. Maybe, I don't know. It's a number that tells you from 0 to 100 your likely chance for reoccurrence. If you are over 30, they do chemotherapy. So you want to be under 30, but obviously I know I'm somewhere above 30 because I had chemotherapy and my markers. I do not know that number, and I think just for my mental well-being, I'm not going to go researching or asking my doctor what that number was, just because I don't need to know right now. Their fear of reoccurrence is already great enough. I don't need a finite number that tells me what to actually expect. So yeah, that is the basic gist of my diagnosis, as well as the markers that kind of tells us that I needed chemotherapy, that I needed to have a double mastectomy, and how serious it really was. If you have any questions that I didn't answer, please ask. There's no stupid question at all. Like I said, I don't expect everybody to know about all of this. In fact, I don't want you to have to know anything about it, but I also want to share my story and to help you advocate for yourself or for your mom or your sister or even your brother, because men can get this too. So just educating yourself is going to put you in the best place to save a life. If it's not yours, it may be a loved one. So I will be back with more videos. My next one will be fertility, because that was the next step in my journey, because I wanted to harvest eggs or do something to save my fertility because the chemo would kill that. So that will be the next video. I'll come back with you about boobs. So stay tuned. Thanks for watching, guys.